Hi there, BookTube, the second part of my summer TBR. I am going to share the adult and non-fiction books I plan to read during the summer month, which I went completely crazily overboard, but I wanted to have a nice selection. I hope to read all of those books really soon. As I said in the first one about a million times, I'm really excited about all of those books, so I decided to put them all into a TBR and see how far I get. So let's start with the hugest book of all of them together, excluding the adult fantasy, because I think there is one or two in there that pretty much equal the size of those I have on here. And let's start with the first one, since that is one a lot of people are currently reading in summer, and that is It by Stephen King. This book and I have kind of a funny story because I cannot for the life of me remember if I actually read this book or not. I know I read a lot of Stephen King back when I was between 10 and 12. I flew through all of the Stephen King books, which might sound strange to you if you're not a Stephen King lover, but for me it was fantastic. I loved his worlds, I loved his writing. This one, I know I read quite a few of his thick books, but he has so many that honestly I can't remember which ones I read and which ones I didn't. I'm going to reread or read it for the first time in English to see if I actually read this before or not. Then I have another that is actually, I think, the biggest book I will ever have read if I'm reading it, and that is A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. Honestly, I put this on my wish list almost 10 years ago. I only remember that it is a book that really talks about India and the history of it and how they fought for their independence. I cannot remember any more of it, and I could have looked it up, but I have 1,500 plus pages to figure out what the story is about. I'm not going to look it up. I'm just going to jump into this book without really remembering what it is all about. I do remember that it is a love story or romance in some way as well. So we will see what this book is about when I read it. Then I have one that is very much talked about book here, and that is A Little Life. This book is one that so many people talk about here on BookTube. It is either one that you love when you read it or you really can't stand the book. It has a character with chronic pain. I'm really excited to see how the book portrays that person, and I don't know any more about this book, and I don't want to. It's a very hard-hitting book apparently, and it's a very soul-crushing one apparently, and I'm just going to read it and see. And then one that I never ever heard anybody talk about, and that is The Woman Who Lost Her Soul. This book follows a human rights lawyer that travels to Haiti to figure out who murdered the photojournalist that he somehow knew, and he gets sucked into the deep world of Haiti, of poverty, of corruption, and of voodoo. Excited to see what this adult general fiction, contemporary, thrillery, mystery kind of book. It just basically has everything that you want in a book. Then I have a book I'm also excited about. Would you have guessed that? And that is A Book of American Martyrdom by Joyce Carol Oates. I recently read Joyce Carol Oates for the first time, and I really loved it. This book is about a man that believes he is fulfilling God's wishes by killing an abortion doctor. Follow that man's life as well as the family of the killed doctor. And I'm just really excited to see how Oates manages to include those religious aspects in this book. The last huge book I have, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This is on my shelves, I think, for a bit over 2 years unread, which is basically unheard of by me, of me, from me, whatever you want to call it. I normally don't let books sit on my shelves unread for that long, and I'm finally in the mood to give this a try. I think a story about a boy who loses his mother, and the only thing he has from her is a picture of the goldfinch, and he tries to figure out how she came into possession of it and gets sucked into the world of art in New York or something of that nature. It's similar to what I just said. Not completely sure if it's completely right, but something like that is happening. Moving on with a pretty small book in comparison, and that is Miss Peregrine Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. I keep hearing about this book. I keep getting this book recommended to me. It is about this woman, Miss Pettigrew, who is a governess, and she's sent to the wrong address, and so she spends a day with a different family than she's supposed to, and that family changes her life forever, and Miss Pettigrew changes the life of the family forever. It will be my first Persephone's classic. And then I have a book by an author I'm so excited to finally have read remembered how much I love her and get back into her writing and her books, and that is Anne Taylor, and this is Letter of Years, and this is about a woman that one day at the beach just starts to walk away from her family, supposedly to go on a walk, but she just keeps on walking away from her family. If you're an Anne Taylor fan, you know how interesting she can tell those simple stories where basically not a lot is happening, but she's still making them very, very interesting, exciting to read. The next one I have is another mixed one where people either love it or hate it, and why don't I just smash myself in the face with it? And that is We Are Ourselves by Matthew Thomas. And in this book we follow this little girl, pretty alcoholic father and a sick mother, I think, and they are Irish immigrants, and it's just the story of her and how she grew up and how she grows older. I know we follow a couple of chapters in the beginning where she's a child, but I think the rest of the story is told from her as an adult. I really enjoy those kinds of contemporary adult family stories where we just follow a character for quite a few years and just get told about their lives. For some reason that really makes me enjoy a book. So I'm going to give this a try and see how much I enjoy this one. I have A Fine Balance. This book is set during 1970 in India, where 4 individual people are pushed together because they have to share a tiny little apartment because the corruption and extreme governmenting of India is taking a complete horrendous turn. And we just follow those 4 people and how their life changed because of that. Next one is one I shared in my first quarterly book haul of this year, which I will link, and that is The Paying Guest by Sarah Waters. This is another historical fiction about a mother and her daughter that live in a house that they can no longer afford on their own, so they are taking paying guests in so that they can stay in their home. This is one of her least liked books, but I kind of enjoy reading the less popular books by authors before I'm moving on to the most popular ones, because if that way just makes more sense to me personally, so I cannot wait to start with this one. The next book I have is The North Water by Ian McGuire. This one taking place on a whale ship, and the only thing I remember about this is that there is a killer on the whale ship that is sails during 1859 towards Arctic waters. I hope it doesn't have too much whale killings. I hope it features more the human kind of killing, but we'll see. We are getting there, guys. The last 2 historical fiction-y kind of books. The first one is The Good Guy by Susan Biel. I have no idea how to say her name. Sorry. This is set during 1960s and is about this married couple that basically get married because the woman got pregnant. None of their lives turned out how they wanted, and when the man meets a woman and I think starts an affair with her, the story evolves from there. And the cover once again kind of looked a bit summery to me. So the next one is yet another book I already shared in a haul, so I will link that one as well. The House at Riverton by Kate Morton. This is a historical fiction mystery crime kind of book where we follow 2 different timelines, one in the past, one in the now. It's set during the summer of 1924 and the winter of 1999, and it's just in some kind of mystery, and this is I think Morton's first book, so I wanted to start with that one. And I heard about Kate Morton's writing that it's really easy and fast to read, so I think that would be a good addition to all of those. And now moving on to the real kind of crime books I have that I want to finally read. The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Paula Hawkins' newest book just came out. I'm really interested to read that because I heard fantastic things about it, but because I own this almost 2 years now and still haven't read it, see a trend in how I collected my TBR for the summer, I want to finally read this. This book is about this woman that rides on a train every day, and she keeps going past this house and she starts to imagine a specific kind of life for the people living in that house, and then she noticed something strange is going on, and I think she starts to investigate, and she does all that while being an alcoholic, so of course nobody really believes her, and she tells somebody that something is going on there. Then I have The Girl with a Clock for a Heart by Peter Swanson. I think this was his first book. I read The Kind Worth Killing last year or the year before, I can't remember, but that was a pretty good crime book. So the college sweetheart of a guy disappears and nobody knows where she went, and it is all about that apparently, so I'm going to read this and see what it is all about. The next crime book I have is another one I don't know anything about, and that is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. I read her newest release, I See You, last year in fall when it came out. Enjoyed that. It wasn't the best crime book, but it was good enough, and as I said, I don't know anything about this book. Then I want to reread a crime book I loved last year, and that is The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchinson. I loved it. It was the best crime book I read last year. It's a really brutal, gripping thriller, and I would not recommend this to you if you have a hard time with rape, because it is kind of heavily featuring that, not graphically, but you know that it happens. If you have an issue with that, stay away from this book, but if you love the brutal, gripping kind of thriller, I highly recommend this. This is a woman that get kidnapped by a man that tattoos butterfly wings on their backs and keeps them in his garden as kind of the butterfly, which, you know, featuring the name. I'm not going to say any more. It's really gripping. It sucks you into the story. It's not a huge book. It doesn't even have 300 pages, but it's so gripping. It's so fascinatingly written. It really is one of the best books I've read in a long time, so I'm excited to reread it. The next one I have is The Night Manager by John Le Carre, and this book I want to read because I recently watched the TV show with the same name, and I love that. It was fantastically done. All those actors that played did fantastic jobs. I really enjoyed it. It features John Pine, who works as the night manager in a luxury hotel, and when he passes along some intelligence information to the British government, people around him start to die. He decides that he was not going to sit by and let government handle it, so he is going to go on the hunt for the person that started to kill everybody around Jonathan Pine. And it's just interesting espionage kind of book. It really makes you question the world around you. It really features how rich people basically live a completely different life from everybody else, and it's just so interestingly done in the TV show, so I'm excited to see how this book was actually written and get the original material. The last two crimey novels are both kind of ones I have no idea if they're crime or science fiction-y, but let's just go with it. The first one is The Possessions by Sarah Flannery Murphy. This is a book about a woman that is able to challenge death, and when a man comes that wants her to contact his wife, she starts to fall in love with him, but then I think she's get taken over by the dead wife. I never read a science fiction thriller before. And then I have The Power by Naomi Alderman. It is about a world where women suddenly get the power to inflict really bad pain or even kill with a flick of their fingers, and just how the world changes with that aspect. I hope this has the positive spin on it and not the negative one, but I'm going to read it and see. The first one is Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know much about this. I just know that it has something to do in a fantasy world where people can ingest metal, and if they do, they get magical powers from it, or they have to ingest metal to get their magical powers if they're magical. I'm not completely sure. I'm going to read it and see what this world is all about. And another Brandon Sanderson I'm going to start reading in July because I have a buddy read is The Way of Kings. This is another fantasy book I don't know much about. I know it's epic, I know it's a big book, I know that lots of people really love this The Way of Kings and The World of Radiance, I think the second book is called, and the third one is coming out the end of the year. Brandon Sanderson is really great in actually completing his series he starts, so I'm really excited to get started with another one of his and just see what I think about it. Next one I have is a smaller fantasy one, and one I already started to read, currently reading, and that is The Iron King by Maurice Durand, and this is about the Iron King, which is Philip the Fair. I think he's the French king, right? It has historical aspects, but has also fantasy elements in it. The first few pages I've read so far are really interesting, and I cannot wait to continue on with this book and see what it has to offer. The next one is one that is currently much talked about here on BookTube, and that is Trader's Blade by Bastian de Castell, and I think the last book in the series just came out, so it's another not huge fantasy book, so that's exciting as well. If I'm remembering correctly, this is set to be a fantastical Three Musketeers. So we have those, let's call them warriors kind of guys that also have magic or fantasy aspects. Not sure. Could read the back, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start reading this book and see what it is all about. The last real big fantasy one I have here is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I decided it was time to finally get started with this one. But I don't know a huge amount what this series is about. I just kept getting recommended it, so I want to finally see what everybody raves about when they talk about the series. I want to finally get into it. And the next two books are the fantasy science fiction-y aspects where I have no idea how to place them, and there are also the last two fiction books I have on my completely ridiculous TBR here, and that is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is a book about a little girl that apparently doesn't need food because God keeps her alive in some way. So a journalist is sent to her to watch her and really figure out if she doesn't somehow eat and just says she doesn't. It's not a huge book. I had it since fall last year, so I want to finally read this and see. The next one I have is actually a bind up of 3 books, and I'm not planning on reading all 3 of the Area X books by Jeff Vandermeer. I already read Annihilation. Really love that book, but I don't know if I plan to reread that before I read the second book, which is Authority. But I don't plan to read the third one right now. I just want to finally continue on with this trilogy. So I just want to read this section of this book. I thought this world was really interesting, so I want to finally continue on. And the next few books I have are non-fiction books I finally want to read, and the first 2 of those are Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso. I had this on another TBR but I didn't get to it, and I want to finally read this. If I'm remembering correctly, this book is just about her telling her story about how she built this huge online business and how she makes her money with it. I don't know if she shares how you can do it or just share how she did it, but that sounds interesting, so I want to finally give this a try. And the other one is Blog Inc. by Joy Cho. I'm not going to try to pronounce that name. If you want to do that, please feel free, but I'm not going to. And this book is just about building a blog, being more consistent in your online presence, and since I'm pretty bad at actually sticking to when I say I'm going to post, maybe this one is going to help me do that. And then I have Do No Harm by Henry Marsh, an autobiographic book by a brain surgeon just telling about his job and his life as a brain surgeon. And once again, I am fascinated by the human body, by the brain especially, so I'm excited to see what this brain surgeon has to say. And the third to last book, yes, you heard that right, it's the third to last book, and that is Schmerz. I would translate this book into pain. This book is just exactly that. It is a book about pain, about people that suffer through chronic pain that can change anything, that have every second of their life be in pain. It is about for example, professional athletes that push their body way over their pain threshold simply because they have to or they feel like they have to. And it is also about the people that cannot even feel any kind of pain. So it's just sounding really interesting. And the last 2 books are both about similar, if not the same topic. The first one is by Alice Roberts, and that is The Incredible Unlikeliness of Being, Evolution and the Making of Us. I really enjoy her books. This would be the third one I read by her. I just really enjoy her aspect on humanity, how humankind came to be as we are. I'm going to see if this book is good as well. And the last book is basically the same thing, but by different authors, so I want to see if he has something else to say, and that is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And once again, this book is just about evolution of humankind, and that sounds interesting. I don't think that any of those 2 books are going to offer me a huge amount of information I don't already know, but I still want to read it and see what different aspects of humankind those 2 authors have to offer. So I'm excited to see what each person has to say. And those were all the books I want to read during summer, which is just ridiculous. I'm just going to spend the entire summer reading, which is kind of wonderful. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would love to hear which books you guys read. If you think that I actually managed to read all those books, which, let's be realistic, is not going to happen, at least I have a big pile of books to choose from. That works out wonderful. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments, so please feel free to do that with me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Until then, in the comments. Bye!